All right, welcome back. We've made it to episode 4 of the Bums Talk Bass podcast. Zoob, do you want to celebrate this one, or?
I mean, it's small victories. It's a little victory every day. I mean,
Right.
we beat a couple other podcasts out. We beat the Hawk Tua podcast, so I think that is a victory in itself.
Well, while we're on the topic of victories, let's talk about losses. Brennan isn't here, and has provided. You know what? Yeah, I'm gonna put him on blast because I'm mad at him. Has provided no explanation whatsoever. When I asked why he couldn't, he said away from keyboard, like I was an accountant.
Like we're not your KPMG colleagues. We are the bums, and we're talking bassing.
Yeah, and guess what? We just aired out his place of work live, and that's what you get.
That's what you get. So KPMG, if you want to sponsor us, too bad. We don't want your trillions. Maybe he had. This is our holiday episode, I guess. We can call this the holiday episode.
Yeah, it kind of is.
And that's why Brennan's not here.
Yeah, and
guess what? If you're committed to the cause and you're, about the holiday episode, you decorate the studio. You decorate the shop. I have 7 lights that are probably together and draining everything. This could have been a Santa hat, but I don't want to. Stock Bass is non-denominational. So
yeah. So yeah, it is just about Christmas. We are knocking on ice fishing's door.
Oh, I am gonna rig up so many tip-ups after this.
By the time you're watching this, me and Zoob are probably sitting and or standing on a sheet of ice right now.
Currently.
But despite that, I still want to just talk about bass fishing.
I didn't take the scope off the boat yet because there's still a chance they sneak out. The bassin never stops. You can't stop it.
No, and even though I've had a lifelong obsession with ice fishing, every year it comes around. Like, I used to be just as, if not even more, excited for ice fishing than other types of fishing. But nowadays, each year, it's not that I'm less into ice fishing, but I'm more like, oh, I just want to get to spring bassing already.
It's just something to ease the pain. It never takes it away anymore. It's not a passion. I still go crazy for ice fishing because this is the time of the year when I can eat all the bass, right, Alex? We can eat the bass now. If they're caught through an ice hole, we can eat them. Is that correct? Or do we just lose another population of people on this podcast?
Yeah, that was. I don't eat them.
We could cut that out.
I can tell you. I can tell you one guy who doesn't eat them, and it's this guy.
That could be a whole another episode on.
I'll eat a perch.
Oh, I'm gonna eat some perch.
I'll definitely eat a perch. Not only will I eat a perch, I will not let a perch live.
Oh, well. R.I.P.
But while we're in the throes of killing perch,
Bassmaster's in the throes of killing co-anglers.
Oh yeah, I guess we could hit that real quick.
We could do a little nod on that. Have you fished any of the Nation series at all? Not your state nation, but you never fished the Nation qualifier, the regionals, right?
Well, I fished the national championship.
You fished the national championship.
Yeah.
So So you had your co-angler there, and did you touch on that on one of the episodes?
Yeah, we talked about it.
Oklahoma and how you had your interaction with the co-angler there.
Yeah, we were talking about like different angler demeanors, and you were like, "Oh, have you ever had like a co-angler in a championship event, and did they act any differently?" Oh, jeez. Okay, so in a little throwback to episode 1, Zoob cut out again, and I can't just glaze over it by talking to Brennan because he's not here. So now we're back. We're in the middle of talking about co-anglers, I guess, and the Bass Nation National Championship a little bit. Yeah, I don't know what point you were getting at, but yeah, I had co-anglers.
I was getting at that. That's the only opportunity on the BASS side of things anymore for co-anglers to fish.
Yeah,
they don't have the opens.
Yeah, I guess so, and that also is interesting because on the Bass Nation side of things, like as opposed to like say a BFL, which is probably like a comparable deal. The BFL is kind of like regimented and everything's the same across the board, whereas your Bass Nation events are run on like a state to state basis. So like, if you're a co-angler, what you're doing in those events kind of is determined by what state you're in. Like I know for New Jersey and Pennsylvania are pretty similar. We have a little trail, 4 or 5 events or whatever it is, but I know some states will have just like their entire nation schedule consists of just one tournament, and that's their qualifier. Like,
it's a lot less opportunity, especially for people that really devote a lot of their fishing to being a co-angler. And that's not a dig at that there's a large population of people that are being kind of knocked out with this.
Yeah.
Do you think, and what I want to say is, do you think, you fished the higher level nation series that they're quote unquote, replacing it with? Do you think that's like an apt, comparison to the opens? Is it like, is it comparable? Is it comparable?
I mean, the four regionals and that national championship are probably, I mean, the national championship is definitely on the scale of an open. The especially now with like how many participants they have, like it used to be 50 boats. I was just there. I think it was like around 200. So that's definitely comparable to an open. The regionals, I mean, we'll see how it goes this year. I know last year the participation was a little less than they expected, but still like a pretty big tournament. I mean, I'm sure it's in the same vein. It's definitely not a Bassmaster Open, but it's probably pretty close. I don't know. I just find it interesting. Like I was just thinking, this never really dawned on me until just now of like how different it seems, like the business and like whatever the business model is of like bass versus Major League Fishing, because like Major League Fishing just puts on so many more tournaments. Like when you're looking at bass from a national level, like
operation.
Yeah, it's quite a different operation because like bass seems to have more resources and exposure and like stuff invested at like the top level, you know what I mean? But Major League Fishing like makes money on tournaments. Like I don't think the Bassmaster like model is really based on making money off of tournaments per se,
Right. No, I would say that Bassmaster is focused on making money off of their top level and providing the best professional fishing coverage and best, professional fishing atmosphere. Whereas Major League Fishing, they're kind of focused on grassroots fishing and just.
I would
say everybody's trying to make money, but they're focused on those lower levels a lot more.
I would say bass is very top and bottom heavy, whereas Major League Fishing is kind of focused on the middle ground, like BFLs and Toyotas, whereas bass is like most of like if you go to your local fishing club, like in your county or in your town or in your area, it's probably a bass affiliated club. So like everybody's paying bass membership dues in like almost every club in the whole country. So I feel like that they have the top and the bottom of like all your local clubs are run through bass, at least around here. I don't know if that's true across the whole country.
No, I think that's true at a very large,
But so I think bass is making a lot of money on like membership dues and then Elite Series coverage, whereas Major League Fishing has a lot going on like in the middle of like making money off of actual like large tournaments.
Right.
Which I think is but to get to the meat and potatoes of the discussion, as somebody who might fish open sometime in the near future, obviously as a boater, I'm fine with it, you know, like, because especially in the opens, you were having a situation unlike the BFLs or the Toyotas where like you have to have a co-angler. In the opens, it kind of seemed like half the field doesn't have a co-angler every day. And it's like, I don't know. I just think it's weird for some guys.
It's uneven. It's an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Or disadvantage, any way you look at it. It's another liability. And at the end of the day, Bassmaster took a direction with the opens. They're not the opens anymore.
No.
They're the opens EQs, elite qualifiers. The whole purpose of you fishing the open isn't to, you know, finish high in your division or compete at like, you know, how you can compare it to maybe a Toyota series or something.
Yeah.
No, the goal of the opens for, I would say 90% of the people fishing there is either qualifying for the Classic or qualifying for the Bassmaster Elite Series. The Elite Series are over the Classic, obviously.
Yeah.
And the co-anglers really don't have anything to qualify for. You're not qualifying for anything. You're just there. And I mean, I hate to say it this way because, you know, I appreciate everything that co-angling has done. I've done it. It's a great way to get into the sport. But at the end of the day, being a co-angler is just adding cash to the pool.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is, especially with how they're doing it, like they're kind of trying to make it like its own like league. Like they're giving it coverage. They're having Bassmaster Live. Like they're kind of trying to make it more of like a product in itself than just like a tournament that guys enter. So like really, if you want to take it in that direction, there's really no point in having co-anglers.
No, absolutely not.
It sucks for the co-anglers if you want to fish a Bassmaster Open, but I can get why the decision was made that way.
But there's still the opportunities still exist at the local levels. You can't your nation needs co-anglers. I go to fish a tournament and they always need co-anglers. The BFLs are always have, you know, their option. If you want to stick with Bassmaster, even if you want to fish those regional qualifiers, they need co-anglers. And it's still, if you want to travel, they're all over the country. It's a great, it looks like a phenomenal series. They go to cool places. And if you want to learn, the opportunities are still there. The schedule is fire. If you want to fish out as a circuit, people do fish out as a circuit too. It's
the schedule for that, it's awesome. I'm not gonna be at any of them because why would I? But if I needed to, I'd probably be fishing 2 of them.
Right. I'm still considering fishing 2 of them.
Yeah, like if I still needed to get in, I would fish the James in April. And if I didn't get in on the James in April, I would probably go to Erie.
Is the James is in April?
The James is in April, yeah.
Uh-oh, I got some thinking to do, fellas.
I think a couple of my buddies are fishing it, so I can link you up with them if you want to go.
Are you thinking ours, your guys, or some of our guys that live down there? Okay. We have some Blake Miles Basson.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's gonna go.
He's gonna be fishing there. He lives on the
place. He has to go. I'm gonna text him
before that. We'll get him on here. We'll give him a little pre-dirt breakdown.
Yeah. He would be a good guy to bring on.
Pre-title guys gets to get another title influence on there.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I would like to bring him on just to bring him on at some point, but
yeah, he's fun.
But no, I'm talking like Frankie and company.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, if me and Frank go, you got to go because you got to see me and Frank in the same room.
Yeah. I was kind of. I mean,
it's fine. It's not yelling. It's fine. It's fine.
I mean, in April, I don't really have like a ton going on. Like, I could just go for fun.
That'll be fun. The James River's fun. There's
I've
a lot
never
of
been.
there's a lot of threes, a lot of trees, a lot of abandoned shipwrecks, mud bars. Really good place to run a brand new lower unit.
All
And if
right,
you want to
so
catch the 10-pounders, you got to run at least 100 miles. It's really fun.
yeah, okay, so maybe I won't.
No, you'll be there.
I mean, there's no point in me going.
Well,
besides,
you'll see.
If it was like somewhere where like if it was like Smith Mountain or like the Potomac or like somewhere I could go and just like smash on them, then I would go for no reason. But I've never been to the James. It doesn't seem like the easiest place to like, just mess around at. So
what is that bay at the Potomac? It starts with an M. A lot of shipwrecks.
Potomac?
A lot of shipwrecks. At the Potomac, main river.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's got a boat ramp in it.
Right. Well, that's the entire James River.
Oh, that's cool.
A lot of shipwrecks. A lot of old industry.
That's cool. Yeah, we love that.
So, no, it's a cool deal. But moving on from that a little bit.
Yeah.
We because a thing about the James River is there's a lot of stuff there, little basic stuff that gets overlooked that just really can still always play, and that's something that we think about a lot. Is just we always looking for the new technique, but we have some older stuff that really we want to kind of dive into a little bit. Not even older, just
some really. With Brennan not being here, I thought this would be the first time that we take an opportunity to do just some old school, getting in the weeds and talking bass fishing, which is what me and Zoob like to do offline. So we might as well just do it here. And before we hopped onto the stream, I posed a question to him, and I don't know what his answer to this is, but I guess the best way to phrase it is, what is something you do a lot that you like either a bait or a technique or something that you don't think people do enough or is known about enough or maybe has been forgotten?
Yeah, no, I mean, do you mind if I just start diving into it?
Yeah, I'm looking to hear what you got to say.
All right, well, I guess I'm gonna go with the train with this one. I guess we're gonna burn it all down.
Okay.
This is a Christmas present to everybody because we're just gonna unfilter it and really rep in. So, I have a question for you. When I was thinking about this, I was like, wow, I always try and stay on like the cutting edge of the newest techniques. I'm always trying to find something different, find something, that new improvement. I was thinking, what's more of like a basic thing? But here, while I'm on that, what's the number one most common technique right now in the world of bass fishing?
In the world? Well,
in tournament bass fishing, what is the number one technique right now?
You could now? I mean, you could go two ways with this. I mean,
number one.
It's probably still just throwing a jig, right?
I was thinking the minnow.
Or are you trying to say throwing a live scope minnow?
I'm saying throwing a live scope minnow.
Yeah, I mean that's the number one technique for like
tournament bass
big time guys, I guess. But
right.
Yeah.
So what was the first thing you ever threw as a minnow? What's the bait you put on there?
I think the first thing I ever did was a fluke.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody nowadays, you go around. I'm just going to dive into it then. What is the number one selling fluke bait in the world right now?
Fluke bait in the.
I think it's probably surpassing the old red package.
What? I don't know.
I don't think it's this one anymore.
Okay, which one is it? Just say it.
The Sakamata shad.
No, it's not. No, it's
Depth
not.
Sakamata shad. You cannot buy a Sakamata shad to save your life.
Yeah, because they don't exist in the U.S. It's not because.
What do you mean? How do they not exist on the U.S.? You can buy it on Tackle Warehouse.
I
You
know.
Can name a fishing shop. Name a retailer where you can't buy it online.
Any of them right now.
They're everywhere. You can't buy them right now.
There's a picture of them.
Right. Why can't you buy them? Why can't you buy them? Not because they're not available, because they're sold out.
I also don't think there's quite a bit of stock. I think obviously a lot of guys throw this, but I think you're thinking about it a little too much in under like the scope of like the upper echelon, like plugged in tournament guys. I don't think Jim in your bass club is throwing a Sakamata shad. He's not.
I don't know. A lot of the gyms are starting to throw the Sakamata shad.
I don't think so. If I went like the club that me and Brennan and Nicholas fish sometimes, if I went to those guys, if I circled all 20 of those guys up in the parking lot and I said Sakamata shad, me and Brennan would probably be the only two who knew what that word meant. I bet you Nicholas probably doesn't even know what it is.
I don't know, because maybe a year or two ago, I could almost guarantee you that no one would know. But with how much and how everything is so accessible and how it's just being blatantly showed out in so many different publications, it's common. People know about it.
If you are a live scope guy who fishes tournaments, you know about it. Absolutely, 100%. But if you are not a live scope guy who fishes tournaments, I don't. Maybe you've heard about it, but you probably don't have any.
Well, either way, besides that, what's another very popular thing? Because I guarantee everybody at your bass club
Did I
reads
just see it
Bassmaster magazine.
flash in your
I think you
screen?
did. I think you did.
Is that jerk shad?
It's a jerk shad. It's the Gussie Glimmer Blue. The state won the Bassmaster Classic.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a miniature, quote unquote, fluke style bait that guys are putting on a little jig head, throwing at them, and it is so gosh darn effective. And people associate the small fluke style so much with a jig and minnow.
Yeah.
People don't appreciate the fact and are kind of losing the whole essence of the fluke itself.
Yeah.
You see where I'm trying to dig at with that?
We can get real in the weeds with that, because that's one that overlaps with me too.
Like that's, and we'll dive into your approach on it, but I feel
when's the last time you saw a guy on Bassmaster or MLF Live throwing a weightless fluke on a EWG?
All right.
Oh yeah, I guess a few guys did it there, but like,
however, that's a unique situation because that's a herring tournament. And like if you're fishing a herring fishery, you're throwing a fluke. That's just how it goes. But the other tournaments, I forget how many there are. It's a valuable option in every single one of those tournaments because it is such a versatile technique that goes well beyond the scope of the jig and minnow. That just gets overlooked. You can't, if you want to go buy a Sakamata shad right now, I brought that up, because if you want to buy one, you could buy them. You could buy as many as you want in size 5, in size 6, size 7, size 8, and size 9. You could buy as many as you want. But if you want to buy size 3 and 4 and 2, better off buying illicit substances from the people of New Jersey. Because it's not happening.
I'll just throw this out real quick as a quick throwaway that we're not going to dive into, but not a bad idea to throw that 6 or 7 on a jig head. But anyway,
oh no, that's why I kind of like slowed off. You notice I said the 5 and then I cut it.
Yeah,
because that's a whole other thing. But that bigger profile is a huge thing right now.
Not a bad idea.
And I'm glad that Alex is.
This is ridiculous. And he did it again. We're gonna just keep going as if it didn't happen. But yeah, throwing a fluke the real old fashioned way. I mean, that's you want to talk about these herring lakes. That's the old school Lake Champlain killer, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Small
The
mount
single
or the double.
a double. Let's not talk about the triple. That's illegal.
I was gonna say, can you throw a double in Bassmaster?
No, actually.
That's crazy.
I don't think you can.
That's so crazy. I don't think you can either, because I can't recall a time I ever have, but throwing a single in Bassmaster. Almost won a New Jersey State Regional throwing a single.
Because it's such a versatile bait.
Oh,
and
yeah.
A lot of times people, what's the number when you're, what's a big alternate to the fluke? Where'd it come from?
Big alternate?
It came from, well, the fluke came from the Senko. The Senko is supposed to be what the fluke is. When Mr. Gary was designing the Senko, he was looking for a bait fish imitator that he could twitch.
I thought the fluke came before the Senko.
No, the Senko came before the fluke.
But wasn't the fluke a big time like saltwater lure for forever?
Maybe in the freshwater world, but I know that I'm almost certain we might have to dive back into that.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody look that up and drop it because I'm pretty sure a Zoom fluke. I'm pretty sure a Zoom fluke predates a Senko, and I think it does by quite a bit too. I don't even think it's particularly close. If I'm being honest.
Al, can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Jamie, pull that up.
Hey, Jamie, pull that up. That's copyrighted. We're done now.
And it's over. Sorry. Spotify bought us just to cancel us.
Where does it win?
I mean, is a Google search even going to show you what year?
Yeah, no. Zoom fluke created in 1970.
I'm right. I'm right by a lot.
Well, actually, if we really want to dive into it, it's the Sluggo.
Yes.
Which have you?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. 100%.
Yeah, no. So I'm wrong.
You want to talk about?
Don't. We could get into the Sluggo.
You want? I bet you. I'll be honest. I haven't. But I bet you. I bet you could.
Definitely could.
I bet you could. Wow.
However, circling back, I brought up the Senko because a lot of guys in a tournament application will fish a Senko in places that they could be fishing a fluke instead, and they limit it. Because in my opinion, a Senko isn't a covering water type bait. A Senko is a very target-minded bait. You can fish a Senko like a fluke, but it's not as effective.
The Senko,
if you want to say cover water while also having a shimmy fall approach and isolated targets as well, 2 birds, 1 stone, is your shallower fluke.
The Senko for me comes out when I'm in a particular pocket or a particular area where I'm fully aware that the fish I want to catch are there.
Right.
And I can take my time and break it down, and they don't seem to want to eat anything more fun. No. But a fluke, so I'll use this example of something fairly recent where I could talk about a fluke. Not this year, but last year, I fished a state championship for the Bass Nation on Kerr.
Right.
And I almost won it. I actually should have won it by quite a wide margin, but I fell victim to the biggest downfall of the fluke, and that was I lost quite a few fish on the first day of the tournament. and I had quite the comeback. But either way, that doesn't matter. The point of it is, I was doing something interesting where, if you know anything about Kerr, it has a lot of water fluctuations and it has a lot of bushes on the bank. And there are these, I guess me and you talked about this. They're actually called nut bushes. They look like stick tumbleweeds that are just up on the bank. And I was just taking a weightless fluke and I was skipping it through these bushes and out the other side. And then I would twitch it, quick, snapping it. Sometimes I'd let it hang for a little while longer when I just came off a branch or I'm just coming out of the bush. But I'm snapping it back and forth, going through these bushes. And there's two things about that. One, it's one of the only applications out there where I can just throw it straight through the middle of a bush and it's not going to get stuck. Two, it's perfect for a reaction strike like that where they're sitting against cover, they're sitting in a bush, and this thing comes right over their head and it's just whack. And it really was, for something like that, it was the perfect technique, because I could flip a bug into there. I could throw a Senko along, in between the bushes and on the edge of it. And like, you would get bites, but for that fluke, it was on a different level. I mean, they would come out and shoot after it, like no hesitation. And especially when,
and the reason why is you do a little more research on it. Those fish don't eat as many bluegills up at Bugs Island anymore.
I'm sure
there's
not.
There's a population. There's a population of herring in there that's growing rapidly.
That is,
and that's something that's so common as well, is that so many people flip. So many people are on that bluegill imitation bite.
Yeah.
But as that herring bite is evolving and they get dialed in on that, that's what they're keen to. That's what they react to. And that's how you introduce that in that situation.
And it's also just a thing. I don't know. In my personal opinion, obviously not in all situations, it depends on the lake, but I think in most situations, if you bring a twitch and fluke right past their head, I think they're way more likely to react than if you just like drop a beaver into their bush.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, the beaver, they can, even though it like falls in front of them, and sometimes you get a reaction if you're right on his nose, but they can come swim up to it, look at it, sniff around it. When that fluke is going past, they gotta make a decision right now.
Well, that's the thing, because when you're flipping a beaver, you're only really giving them one opportunity to react.
Yeah.
When you're working that fluke, and you could see that just with their behavior, you're giving them multiple opportunities for you to trigger that flight or fight response.
Mm-hmm. And you can even, and since it's almost like it's like a almost top water kind of, like it's under the surface, but you can see it. And especially in a situation like that where you're fishing these super shallow bushes, sometimes you can see the fish come up after it. And even if he doesn't commit right away, you're in a situation now where you could see the fish, you could see the bait, you could see how he's acting, and you can find a way to trigger that strike now. You know what I mean? And also, like you were saying, if you're in a situation where you're wanting to cover water, which I was in with those bushes. I mean, if I was trying to flip them or throw a Senko at them, I'm moving a lot slower, and I think getting a lot less bites. I think it accomplishes both things at the same time. And in an absolute worst case scenario, it's almost like a smaller glide where it's like you're getting them to show themselves.
Well, at the end of the day, what's a fluke? A soft what?
Jerkbait.
And you talk about, you have your cover situations. It's sometimes you can get that twitching and pausing in areas where they're not always going to react. People throw the fluke on these herring fisheries. Can they throw the jerkbait over in this open water situation with the treble hooks and we're worried about getting snagged? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can work this fluke in such a different manner. And I'll tell you what, if they're committing to it, if they're eating it, and if you modify it to where they're eating it, we can dive really deep into that. your hookup ratio with a fluke, you were talking about it. If you make the fluke soup, if you're using, say, a Zoom fluke and you boil it a little bit, you're going to get a better hookup ratio.
Absolutely.
But depending on how you hook it, I would argue to say that you have a better chance of landing a fish if you get a good hook set on it with a fluke than a jerk bait. I like a single hook more than some treble hooks. I'll be honest.
I mean, once you actually get them, absolutely.
If you get them, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it can be finicky on the initial bite.
The problem I have with a fluke is it wants to ball up on that EWG real bad, and it kind of like, I don't know. I mean, in an open water situation, you can add that like stinger treble to it. But for me, in a lot of situations, like
in that open water situation,
well, yeah, that too. But for me, at least, a lot of my at least favorite applications for it involve the necessity of it being weedless. Like a fluke might be one of the most weedless baits out there. Like I said, I'm putting it through the middle of these bushes, and it's never, ever, ever getting hung up. It's, I mean, another situation that I've used it a bunch is skipping docks at Smith Mountain with it. They love a fluke at Smith Mountain. And there's a million docks at Smith Mountain, and especially in a practice situation, a lot of times what I would do in those college tournaments we had at Smith Mountain was I usually wouldn't even wind up using the fluke all that much in the tournament. But in practice, when I'm trying to cover water and fish a lot of docks, I can use that fluke to fish through sections of docks a lot quicker and either get a couple bites or maybe just get a couple fish to show themselves and, kind of get a gauge on what stretches have better groups of fish. And then on tournament day, I can go back through those, throw a jig, shaky head, Senko, whatever at those docks. But I was able to use that fluke in practice to be, way more effective.
It is the most versatile search bait by a absolute landslide. You can put it in any situation. It's
fishing deep.
Easy to fish. As long as there's other applications where you could fish it deep, though. I mean, let's think about it here.
There are, but it's just
not as a search bait. But we're talking about, other ways to fish a fluke besides on a minnow head. What else can you do? You can put it on a freaking Carolina rig if you want to get that fluke down there. One of these, the larger Z-Man-scented jerk shads,
it's turning into a
Carolina rig.
That's it.
What's that?
I said that's another big thing you can do on Kerr is turning into a Kerr Lake episode. But
oh yeah, oh well. I mean, I should have watched that episode on Kerr Lake. I also had an episode on Kerr Lake, but it wasn't a podcast episode. It was a mental breakdown episode that ended up with this hook in my hand. I just found this. I kept it.
There we go. Good for you. But yeah, no, I mean a lot of people throw a fluke on a Carolina rig. And here's something. Here's some sauce. I'm giving some sauce. Not for like actually fishing deep, but if you want to get more than like your usual 6 inches to a foot out of a fluke, this is something I do a lot. I take one of those lead suspend strips, like the peel and stick ones that guys put on the bottom of hard baits or whatever, and I'll wrap it around the shank of an EWG hook. So it's just a little bit of weight. It's not as much as like if you were to get like a belly weighted screw lock, which is almost like too much weight that kind of changes the action of it. It's just a little bit that keeps it down to kind of change your 6 inches to a foot to like a foot to 2 foot, or even you know, if you have the patience and you really, really want to, I mean, you can count that thing down to like 3 or 4 feet in a few seconds. And when you're twitching that back with just that little lead strip wrapped around your hook, it's not enough weight to affect the action of how it's moving. So you're it's still doing the whole thing like it's a regular fluke, which is a big thing in places like so
everywhere.
Here's a good example of where you want to do this. You're on a fluke bite on Champlain, and today it's windy, and your fluke is blowing out of the water because it's riding up the chop. You put one of those little suspend strips on there, bomb it out, count it a couple seconds before you start working it. Now you're under the waves.
Now, a way that I used to do it, actually, without doing that's sauce. I would just get a heavier gauge hook. If you're in a real pinch.
Yeah.
Also, you will still catch that fish. They will eat it if you throw on a heavier gauge hook. If you want to just be an absolute degenerate and just buy tackle, they also make these. The Sakamata heavy salt.
Yeah.
Heavyweight. And that also keeps it down there with higher dents. That
thing is the sauce.
And that color too is probably the sauce as well.
But
you can show it again. Everybody can watch. You can get this exact one. Look at it. I'm gonna make sure everybody sees the absolute saucy sauce.
Yeah, so you got a couple options. You got option 1, which is scour the entire internet for one of those. And then you have option 2 is boil a regular super fluke and then put a suspend strip on the hook, and then you get the same thing.
Correct.
Not totally the same thing, but close enough.
But they don't care.
Does the same thing. Something that does the same thing. Yeah, which is another thing. Like we talked about, going to what I was saying about like fishing at Champlain and stuff. We talked about like herring lakes and stuff. Schooling smallmouth. Love that thing.
What do you think that?
I mean, I think it's pretty.
But like, why do you think they go for it instead of like a jerk bait?
I think, I don't know. Me personally, if you just look at them in the water, like a jerkbait gives you more options and more versatility. Well, I shouldn't even say more versatility. It gives you easier fishability because it can dive and it can get you to where it wants to go. But if those fish are high enough that they're going to eat the fluke, like to me, I think it's pretty obvious that a fluke in the water looks exponentially better than a jerkbait.
You can make it jump out of the water. You can make it skimmer and just work it, not just with a typical jerkbait pattern that they're so accustomed to. I think it's the erraticness of it and the ability that if you want to stop it and really make it die, it can have that dying baitfish action.
I mean, it's just the simple fact that it's soft. I mean, a jerkbait is rigid and it's uniform, and it has it this way, it has it that way. You can mess with it and make it do different things, but it's pretty, it is what it is. It's stiff. It's a reaction strike. They hit it because of the twitch. The fluke, if you ever watch that thing, like when you twitch it, the tail, like it's not just it's a
up, down, left, right, out of the water, skimmies on the top, the tail shifts.
It's gonna do what an actual bait fish is gonna do way more than a jerkbait is. It really just comes down to, does your situation let you throw a fluke? Are those fish going to come up high enough to get it? If you're fishing for smallmouth and it's
really
the middle
quick,
of summer,
you're talking about the difference between a fluke and a jerkbait.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was going to say that certain flukes do this, and the one reason on the larger end of the Sakamata shad, a lot of people say the advantage of a jerkbait is you're jerking it, you're pausing it. You're able to have that, suspend and sit properly in its face. Certain times, these fish are actually able, when you twitch your jerkbait, not twitch your jerkbait, when you twitch a fluke, especially something like the Sakamata, they'd say, why do people like the Sakamatas, though? Because of the roll, right?
Oh, yeah.
That roll wasn't originally designed to be on a forward-facing sonar head. The roll of that is for it on these wings. The roll is designed to balance itself with the salt like a normal jerkbait and have that good suspend and have that good pause. So you're not just having always that entirely out of control erratic action. If you want to have a more controlled response, especially fishing around targets or even in open water, that controlled response is still a thing with a proper roll and a proper suspend and a proper pause.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many things you can do with a fluke when it comes like to get it to do what you want in terms of bait selection, hook selection, weight selection, like we were talking about. Like, if you just take the time one day to just like watch what it does in the water when you do different things with it, you can figure out a way to make it do what you want it to do. I mean, and I'll just say this to kind of wrap up the fluke talk, unless you have something else to add.
I think I got it.
My buddy Andy, I can't tell you the amount of times when we're fishing, whatever random New York, northern New Jersey lakes that are just like that classic smallmouth, largemouth mix, whatever going on. And this guy just bombs a fluke off the opposite side of the boat into the middle of the lake, open water, and just like he would do that. There are certain lakes we fish where he would just sit on the back of the boat and throw the fluke in the opposite direction all day long and catch just as many fish as we are throwing at the bank. Like, and this is all pre-live scope stuff. I mean, you can, in some of these northern lakes that have large fish populations and large bait populations, alewives, stuff like that. I mean, you used to be able to, and I'm sure you still can, and you could probably do it way more effectively. Just throw a fluke in the middle of nowhere and catch fish.
Just on a minnow, just throwing it.
Yeah. Getting sick in the minnow.
If you guys want, we could really dive into this. If you guys don't want to, an in-depth fluke video, maybe we'll do an in-depth fluke video, because I'll tell you what, I mean, if we didn't want to shift around, I could go into the meticulous details. I don't know about you, Al.
Yeah, I mean, we just did like 20, 25 minutes on a fluke, and
we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, barely touched it. But
it's one of those things, man.
Yeah, I mean, circling back to what we originally said, I'm sure you know this about me, especially over the past 2 years, because I've talked about it and fished with it an absurd amount. But one of the, I shouldn't say it's underappreciated or underutilized, because everybody knows what it is. But I don't think there's anybody out. I mean, I'm sure there are guys, but I don't think there's many people out there who throw it as much as me. The good old-fashioned football jig. And not your little, we could talk about your little Playboy, but I'm talking a regular full-size caster out and drag it football jig.
Go ahead, Meow.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. For some reason, my whole screen just went black. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, your screen went black on my end too, but it was only for like a second and a half. So,
all right, so we're good. But no, I heard that. You're talking. You're not talking the finesse. You're not talking the Smalley snatcher. You're not even talking about the Jolie mop. You're talking about reliable.
Old standard football jig, which I really don't think is. I mean, a football jig is, I would say, starting in like June through November, is on my deck, tied on, ready to go almost anywhere. Like if I'm planning on doing any type of fishing deeper than like 5 feet that day, I'm probably gonna at least throw a few casts with a football jig. And there's a lot of lakes and there's a lot of situations where I'm gonna be throwing it all day. I mean, the ratio of big fish I catch on a football jig compared to other baits is absurd. Like, when I get bit on a full-size football jig, you catch so many big fish. Might not catch as many, but you're like, I don't even want to put a number on it. I was gonna give like a percentage, but I don't know this to be true or not. But it just feels like when you're throwing the football jig, every time you crack the bat, you expect it to be a good one.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And I mean, it's, diving into the topic of the conversation here, it's not on your deck as much. It's not on anyone's deck as much because I love a finesse football jig. But you know what? So does everybody. I'm not special in that. I'm gonna do something right now because I'm a finesse football jig freak. Yeah. I throw so many. I'm getting my normal box out. I'm gonna see if I can find one. I'm so serious.
Here it is.
I don't know if I have quite a few normal football jigs. Ball head, mop. This is where we're starting at. That's kind of normal.
No,
75% normal, but no. No.
So,
oh my God. Oh, we are at. Keep going here. I'm going to try.
So, as you know, I tie my own jigs.
One.
Wow. I tie my own jigs. I'm not exaggerating when I say, I'm not exaggerating at all. I may be under exaggerating when I say I've gone through probably 150 half-ounce football jigs this year.
$150.
Probably about 150.
Do you mind, I'm just wondering, for a conservation effort, would you be able to put here, the approximate GPS locations of where those were snagged at? Just so we can get those back, save the environment. I think everybody would appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a couple locations on a couple select lakes in the greater New Jersey region that probably have 20 football jigs on one rock right now, and they're all mine. But dude, I mean, I throw that thing a lot.
What do you think, is the deal breaker on that? What do you think makes him tick on that old school football jig? Because people, like I said, a lot of people throw the finesse one. Do you think that the finesse one with, say it's everybody, they always see that small profile now?
So
when they see that normal one?
There's two things with it, right? One thing with that finesse football jig, especially in our area, like you said, I bet you a lot of people's boxes in the Northeast look a lot closer to that one that you just showed than what mine does. And I think there was probably a time 5 to 8 years ago where if you were on that, you were on that. But that time has passed. I think everybody does it. I think it's way more common. I think it's almost the opposite. I mean, I've seen people talk about this with glide baits and stuff like that, when the fishing gets tough, you can get small and you could get more finesse, but you could also get bigger. I think a lot of times with the finesse football jigs and the Ned rigs and all the tiny stuff that they're seeing on the bottom, it makes kind of like a mid to a large size, like a 1/2 ounce to a 3/4 ounce football jig, almost more finesse than the finesse football jig in terms of like, it's not what they're seeing as much. And I think it's also with those bigger size fish, which, like I say, I feel like there's a disproportionate amount of bigger bites I get on that bait. That's the size of what those fish are eating. And I think a lot of times, and this is a personal theory of mine, which I don't even think it's a theory anymore. Over the past 2 years, I've definitely proven it to be correct time and time again. I think a lot of times you're not fishing that big football jig to be a crawfish presentation at all. I think it's supposed to be a bluegill.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And I think especially in the north and the northeast, when you're talking largemouth, most of the time on most of your standard northern lakes, your biggest largemouth bass in the lake are going to be primarily eating bluegills.
Bluegill. With that, not to fry anything, what are you throwing on the back of them?
You know what I'm throwing on the back of them?
What are you throwing on the back of them?
And this is big. I think this is a big key to it too. Throwing a chunk. Old school chunk.
Old school chunk.
Like I'm not throwing an actual like pork rind trunk, but the ones that look like that.
Oh yeah, the classic. Do you have any you like? Did you see the new Uncle Josh's? Guys are mixed on them.
I have.
Guys are mixed on them.
I throw a few different ones.
I throw the accent.
I do throw the accent. I was gonna say there's a couple scents associated with some of these chunks that I do that one I'm not gonna dive into. But
right.
A lot of times I just use the Bass Pro XPS one because it's like cheap.
There.
And I could just pour my own stuff on it and make what I want. But either that or the accent. Pretty much. It's pretty much it.
Zoom's a good bet too. The old Zoom salt.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Even Zoom makes that like slightly bigger one. That's like it's a chunk, but it kind of kicks a little bit. I like that one a lot.
Because you know what else kind of kicks a little bit?
What?
A bluegill pecking on the bottom.
Yeah. I like to add a little. Still not like I don't want to throw like a rage craw or something on it.
Yeah.
But I like to add a little bit of kick, like more in the summertime when it's hotter. Like I'll put like a 4-inch chigger craw on the back of it sometimes if I really want to. That's like the furthest I'll go in terms of like action and movement. Whereas the furthest the other way I'll go is like the really old school, like short-tailed chunk that just kind of doesn't really do anything. Like,
so you're modifying these trailers and going with the same size jig. That's standard 1/2 ounce football jig.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to upsize, I'll throw a 3/4 sometimes, but that kind of more goes in tandem with the summertime. It's hotter. We switch to the big chigger craw. Now we're gonna go even a little further. We're gonna make it a big 3/4 ounce big profile jig. So that's more of like a July, like middle of the summertime thing.
But I have another box that I'm not going to get out because I missed that standard section. I have my finesse jigs. I have a couple standard ones, but I have an entire box of those megas, that old school Jolie mop. That's because I was living in an area where that was a very prominent thing. And those fish, I almost guarantee you, now that I'm thinking about it, they weren't eating a craw.
No.
I was throwing at those fish that were eating primarily crappies.
Yeah.
And large bridge. And when they want that big profile on this, and you're throwing that when that water is, high 80s, almost 90 degrees, and they still eat that large profile.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I'll throw it. I said June to November, but really I was just kind of carving my way around not during the spawn.
No.
I'll throw it in February and March too.
No, I mean, even that early pre-spawn.
Yeah. I caught last year I caught a 6 something in February on that half-ounce football jig with that short little no movement Bass Pro chunk. I mean, probably I feel safe saying probably 40 to 50%. I'll say 40 because 50 is pushing it. Probably 40% of the bass over 5 pounds I caught this year were on a football jig.
Figure.
And I think that goes there is also something to be said. There are 2 lakes in particular that I fish a lot that they really like it at. So that might be part of the reason. But I mean, I've thrown it all over the place. And the thing about it is there's nothing crazy to it. I'm using basic colors, I'm using old school basic trailers, and I'm dragging her, giving her a little twitch, but you hit a rock, pop it over, do that whole thing. There is one thing though. That I'm doing different. And this was spawned out of my original theory that I had 4 years ago, probably, that they were eating bluegill. And this is something, gosh, if guys are sticking through this episode, they're getting some stuff out of me this episode.
That's your Christmas present right here.
When I started figuring out that they were eating it to be a bluegill, I would cast it out, let it get to the bottom, drag it a little bit, right? And then and I can't even tell. It's a certain situation. It's not happening all the time. But if you're really on a good football jig bite, they'll tell you it's happening. And a lot of guys won't even notice this. I mean, I've seen this happen to guys and they just write it off and don't even think about it. They go, oh, that was crazy. When you're done with your cast and you start burning that thing back to the boat and you're just trying to get it back to make another cast. I mean, you're turning your handle as fast as you can. And halfway up the water column football jig, whoom, smoking it. And I started thinking, well, I'm gonna try to do that on purpose. And I let it go to the bottom, burn it. Let it go to the bottom, burn it. Let it go to the bottom, burn it. And I mean, there are certain times where I'm not kidding. It sounds crazy with a football jig. I'm not kidding. You can't move that thing fast enough. You cannot turn your handle fast enough, and they will still eat it.
Well, you want to know what that reminds me of completely? 2 things. One, it reminds me of a standard retrieve with, say, a deep jig, a deep hair jig. But it reminds me of one thing. If you want to, that's just a very standard retrieve for that.
It's similar to that big old white hair jig. I think the only difference with it is I am still like having it go all the way to the bottom and keeping it close to the bottom and stuff like that. Whereas like a hair jig, you can do that with a hair jig, but you're more likely to like fish it middle of the column or over a brush pile or something like that.
But you know what that really, really sparks into?
What?
And if we're talking about old school techniques that people really aren't, that kind of get forgotten. That retrieve was pioneered by Mr. Tommy Biffle with the Biffle bug and the wobble. that was kind of a football jig before a football jig, but that's how your textbook's supposed to fish a biffle bug.
Oh, yeah.
Is you're supposed to burn that thing and whack it off as much stuff out deep off rock as possible and pause it.
Well, that was not necessarily always burn it, but moving it.
It's a common retrieve for it.
They used to call it the crankbait of jigs.
Right.
That was a big topic of conversation when I was down in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. Guys were talking about throwing that thing. A couple guys who I was staying with mixed it in. I tried it. I never really got anything going with it, but a couple guys I was staying with mixed it in and caught a couple nice fish on it in practice and stuff. And I know local guys still throw that, whatever, a biffle head, swinging football jig, whatever it is. There's a lot of different versions of it, but it's essentially just a football jig head with a free swinging hook that you can put any bait on and really kind of, grind it through those rocks and give it more of like a movement. Which is similar to what that's an interesting bait, because that's a bait that, like, it's not old. It's not like super old school. It's like early 2000s. I think it gained a lot of technique. It gained a lot of popularity and then it fell out.
Because we know it got popularity, an old school football jig, and we got advancements in crankbaits. That was the biggest thing, in my opinion. Because before, you have to remember, you weren't able to, and the chatterbait, which that's a whole other topic if you want to dive into a chatterbait.
Chatterbait changed everything, but we're not talking about that today.
We're not talking about that. But if you wanted to fish a crankbait, back then, 70s, 80s, and you want to fish a crankbait 20 plus feet, crankbait was pushing 4 inches. If you want to do it, and you were going to rip your arm off if you wanted to, it wasn't efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get that jig, you get that biffle bug down there. Now crankbaits, you get a crankbait go down 22, 24, 25 feet at a smaller profile, and you can get it down there and have it reflect.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes if you just want to, have that retrieve, because that's a common way to fish a crankbait, is that burn and pause. That burn and pause technique is something that is just universally it just triggers something.
It's deadly. And that's a thing, I'm talking about in the context of football jig. You can do it with a lot of things.
A lot of things.
You don't think about doing it with. But I mean, that's a thing, though. That's the things you got to pay attention to. Like I say, a lot of guys will have stuff like that happen and not pay attention to it. I mean, how many times have you had on whatever bait, insert bait here to the conversation?
Burning it back to the boat.
You start bringing it back to the boat. Boom.
Doubled over.
All the time. All the time.
It's never an accident.
No.
There's never accidents.
No, I mean, usually nowadays, especially now that it's something I like recognized and something that I have like a cadence and a way to fish down for, if I get one bite when I'm burning that football jig back into the boat, once I get that first bite, it's like, okay, game. Like, it's 100% guarantee. Yep. Once that happens once, it's like, okay, it's one of those days, game on. And I can fish it like that for the rest of the day, and I will catch more fish doing it 100% of the time.
You could dive on the science side of things. That could be a front. You can have a generation of bluegills moving through. They're scattered. They're erratic.
Mm-hmm.
The fish feel good. But at the end of the day, you could take it however you want. It's just something that gets a reaction.
I mean, it's even one of those things, like, it might not necessarily be telling you that, oh, you need to burn your jig back to the boat all the time like you just did, but it might be telling you, oh, they wanted a little more aggressive, and now instead of doing my normal drag it on the bottom thing, I mean, I'll fish a football jig crazy. I mean, I'll, pop it up, reel, throw it to the side, bounce it up twice, 3-4 feet, start, giving it like a half reel pop. I'll make that thing start moving. And They like it like that sometimes. They like it like that a lot. You know, you think about a jig, you think about, especially a football jig, you think about just dragging. I mean, you think about any jig, you don't think about fishing it fast. I mean, you can fish a jig fast.
You can fish as fast and slow as you want.
You can fish a jig fast, boy, and they'll. It's a thing a lot of people don't do. The cadence of a jig that is in between a drag and a swimming jig, like you not dragging a jig, but not swimming a jig either, kind of just like working it around.
Yeah.
Nobody does that.
Because everybody's dragging a little finesse jig, which is commonly interchangeable with a Ned rig at this point.
And I'll tell you this, I know you love the thing. And it's weird to say because of how much I like throwing a football jig. I don't ever catch crap on that finesse football jig anymore.
Well, you know why I always throw the finesse football jig? My fisheries have a lot more smallmouth than you. And I'm primarily fishing for smallmouth, going after, crays, gobies, things along that part of the spectrum.
Even like I was trying to force that thing on Candlewood a few times this year. And I couldn't get one to sniff it, dude. They'd run away from it.
But here's the thing. On Candlewood, and I'm not going to shout them out or anything, but
yeah.
There's a popular finesse jig that was pioneered on Candlewood.
Oh, yeah.
That everybody knows about. And long story short, I think they know that profile. I think they're horrified from it.
They're definitely terrified from it. If you can see a smallmouth on the bottom on live scope and you throw that jig at them, they run. They run. They run away.
Yep.
But, I mean, as you know, my favorite smallmouth lake in New Jersey, where we catch them pretty good, I'll catch them all day long on that half ouncer. I throw that little tiny one out. I don't get bit. I don't know what
it also it could be a confidence thing too.
It definitely probably is, but like
I'll tell you what,
I used to have confidence in it.
But at the end of the day, they're biting that jig.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one thing. They're still biting that normal jig.
And I'd definitely rather them for a variety of reasons. I would rather them bite that normal one than that little one.
Oh, I don't blame you. Your landing percentage has to be almost 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta throwing it on 17-pound line, cracking their faces off.
It's fun.
You know when they're it's so much fun.
It's fun.
It's not only like one of my most effective. Like I don't understand. Like people are like, oh, dragging a jig is boring. If I could drag a football jig 8 hours
all day,
every day, all year, I would. Man, when you get that, and he's sliding with it, and you know he has it, and you can
there's no other feeling.
You could just take your sweet old time setting up shop because you got one big single hook and you know you got him.
There's no other feeling.
And then bringing them to the side of the boat, you got 17, 20-pound line. You got a 4 or 5 pounder on a big single hook, and you just flip them right in. You're not even worried about it.
You have no reason to be worried about it.
No. But that's
what are we thinking here? Final count of conventional football jigs in my boat. No finesse tactics, no hair, no tungsten.
3. Zero.
We have ball head jigs, which I enjoy a good ball head jig. But that
I got a whole box.
We have got a bunch of guys like this, but this is tungsten. I'm just going to start going off on tackle. There's a bunch of these. These are called depths headlock jigs, but they're open water. It's a conventional football jig, but it's still, kind of in the category of finesse. It doesn't have that really heavy gauge hook. I don't have any just good old-fashioned Alex Johnson juice chips. And maybe I'm going to have to make an order after this podcast.
I have a box that is filled to the brim. I mean, it's overflowing. And the entire box is half-ounce football jigs. The entire box.
I have a box overflowing back there about the same size of all just assortments of finesse.
And they're all on the same exact head because I tie them myself. And they're all just a basic skirt that I tie and flip it on there. Most of them are just one solid color. Some of them are two color. There's not anything crazy. Like I'm throwing a straight black or a straight brown or a straight green pumpkin. I'll mix in a couple strands of orange for some flash. I'll mix in a couple strands of purple for some flash. But like I'm talking just a box full of just plain old jigs.
Plain old meat.
Yep. And like I said, I've probably went through like, dude, in the middle of fishing season, you could because I and not just football jigs, all jigs. I fish a jig a lot. I tie my own flipping jigs. I tie my own ball head jigs, and I tie my own football jigs. But I mean, you can catch me in the middle of the summer. I'm tying jigs once a week. That's how many of them I'm going through. Like I said, I probably went through 100, 150 of these half-ounce football jigs this year. If you look at
what head do you like?
I just throw those. I just throw the plain Boss football head jig.
What hook you got on there? You know what hook you got on there?
I have no idea. It's not super thick. It's not super thin. I think it's honestly probably thinner than what most people would expect out of that, but I like it like that.
Very interesting.
But yeah, I mean that's about all I got on that. Because
I mean if you think about it though, who's a big thing that's coming back is a rubber jig. I mean, gosh, you look at Tyler Williams putting on a clinic wherever he goes. He's not throwing a finesse jig. He's throwing a rubber jig that's pretty much a standard size. Yeah, and he's just throwing it at everything that swims. And even if you want to go on a wider,
I mean, he's live scoping with that thing, right? Like,
yeah, a lot of guys live scope with him. But at the end of the day, live scoping is just target fishing, and he's fishing that however he needs to.
He's not live scoping like, oh, look at that, pinging a minnow. He's
hitting targets.
Yeah.
And well, another way is, I mean, if we really want to dive into it, these depth jigs, they're designed to be swam and ripped through grass and around grass.
Yeah, there's a few of them. There's a few of them.
And there's a couple of different ways to fish a jig like that, but that's not what we're going to dive into today. Because we dove into a lot. And if you think about it too, the two techniques we talked about, we didn't even mean to go old school. They're just kind of like very simple techniques that I guarantee you can go anywhere in the country and put on an absolute clinic with these only two things. I think if you really want to dive into it, you can have these are the only two lures you possibly need in your boat at any given time.
No.
If you really come on.
I mean, I get.
You want to really simplify it to the almost simplest level. No, you have two approaches. You have your bait fish oriented, suspended technique, and then you have a bottom oriented technique.
Yeah,
that's as simple as it gets. I mean, obviously, this is the only things you need. I'm not saying you're going to go fish the opens tomorrow with a box of football jigs and a bag of flukes and win.
You might.
I guarantee you can go to any fishery, and if you have a box of football jigs and a couple flukes in the boat, you should get a bite or two.
Yeah. Yeah, those are straight up bite getters for sure.
Wild how we came to that. No rehearsal, just pure brainstorming. I'm very happy with how that came out.
Wild how I wrote down like 4 or 5 topics to get to, and we're an hour 20 in, and we did one. But I guess that means we spilled the juice on it.
You spilled the juice on the details.
Yeah, I guess we'll wrap it there. I mean, let us know if this is stuff you're into, because this is something that me and Zoob definitely discuss. This is like what our conversations on the phone sound like a lot of the time. So I like diving into tackle. I like diving into the weeds. I'm sure
we had to
regardless
hold
of the
back, and not
feedback,
just for the sake of holding back for information's sake, because we got nothing to hide. We're holding back because we just want to cover so much. We could dive into a project for 2 hours. Dive into the fluke forever.
I could, especially that fluke. I mean, there are tips and tricks and little sneaky things with the football jersey, but I think I talked about most of them. With that fluke, we could keep going.
We could have went forever.
Yeah. But anyway, like I said, let us know if this is something you guys like more, something you guys like less. Because I'd like to know. I mean, either way, this is definitely not going to be the last time we do this. But
absolutely not.
So that is episode 4 of Bums Talk Bass, and we will see you guys next time. Maybe with Brennan, but I might kick him off forever.
I don't know. I had fun tonight. Brennan's got to earn his spot back.
Yeah, he's got to work for it.
All right, well, Al, you might want to go check your tip ups right now.
Yeah. I got to get on that.
You better get on that ice. Coming to you next.
Yeah,
we should have something pretty chill for you guys.
Yeah, I haven't even dug out the stuff yet. I got to start rigging.
We're on the water right now as this is being recorded, as this is being released to you.
It's almost a certainty that while you're watching this, we are ice fishing right now.
If you guys want to hear about that, we'll let you know.
I'm sure there's going to be plenty on it. All right. Well, we will see you guys next time.
Peace out.